Don't open the Pandora's box and let all the Greeks out.
Too late.
They caused the trouble for all of us. Hello, this is the QUACKCAST. I'm Ozone Ocean. This is QUACKCAST number 548. And we have Tance and Baines here. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Did you say hasho, Tance?
No, I said no, but I'm leaning on my chin, and they came out weird.
That you're doing a fake Chinese accent for us there.
I thought she said Hashem. I didn't know.
I wouldn't dare.
Jewish.
That sounds Portuguese, yeah, I guess. I wouldn't dare do even that.
It's very international. Well, we are talking about translating ideas for different cultures, or like basically when you have something that's like, you know, you watch something from America, or you watch something from Greece, or you know, you read something from Greece, or you read something from, I don't know, China or whatever. Some cultural concepts do not translate. And it's just interesting to find out what. It's also interesting to, you know, look at your own work that you make and think, you know, how would I translate these cultural idioms or ideas from my culture to make these more understandable by others. So, like, you know, we think that America, Australia, Britain, South Africa, New Zealand, you know, all English-speaking languages have the same culture, but we don't actually. And there's a lot of cultural things that do not translate or aren't familiar to other people. So it's interesting to talk about that. And it's also interesting to talk about, you know, stuff that you don't get, that you see in media all the time. And you just think, what the hell is that? Why do they do this? Why? It's just sort of expected that I should understand, but I don't, because we don't do that here. So yeah, that's what we'll have a chat about. First, we'll get into the featured comic. QUACKCAST has given us a lovely little feature this week, and it is called The Last Aviatrix. So, Quai, tell us about The Last Aviatrix.
Hello, this is QUACKCAST, and the feature I've selected for this week is The Last Aviatrix by Buster Cagle, and it is rated T for teen. The Aviatrix has seen it all, or at least can recall life on Earth before the American War. During an event that involves a mysterious elderly man on a runway, the most talented aeromancer in the city ready to fix a plane, and a couple of bandit stowaways, the Aviatrix is about to start up the motors of an aluminum bird. Here's the Aviatrix's opportunity to show the next generation how a reputation is earned. The comic is drawn in full-colored pages of a traditional printed comic book format. The first issue, Apocalypticana, is now complete. Soar with the Aviatrix and Henry Oppenheimer and read The Last Aviatrix by Buster Cagle, rated T.
And that was Quai with her feature, The Aviatrix, which is a story about a woman who is an aviator, I believe. Just the old term for women who flew airplanes. They were called aviatrixes. You know, good old... who's that American lady who flew around in airplanes in the 1920s? 30s. Yeah. Amelia Earhart. Yeah, you're right, Tance. Thank you. Amelia. And yeah, so they were known as aviatrixes, which is a weird thing. And that was the thing, that anything that a woman did, they appended the suffix trix to it. Some stupid reason. You know, like an old term for a female comedian is comedian. And
that's from French, though.
Yeah, but there's also a tricks version of that, I believe. So comediatrix, yeah. There's tricks.
Never heard that one.
But sounds very Latin to me.
I think it is. You're probably right. Yeah. So the only version we have of this these days, of course, is dom for men and dominatrix for women, and that's where most people think it comes from. I mean, everybody thinks it comes from there. Even I did, because that's the only place you hear it. But yeah, it was for everything, and it sounds weird because of that sexual connotation now. And of course, it did not have a sexual connotation. That's completely modern. Well, okay, That was a bit of an aside. So next up we have Gunwallace's music for us. He has done the theme to this lovely little comic called Speaking in Tongues. So
Tongues.
Yes. Tongues.
Oh, okay. So it is the actual speaking in tongues. It's not some variation.
It's not some clever pun, no. Tongues, speaking in tongues. Tongues is a
dramatization of a buffet restaurant or something.
Clicky clacky. That's how it's done. That's how you always have to use tongs. You have to clack them 3 times before you actually do anything with them. But no, this is a different tongue, and if your tongue can go click clack, there's something wrong with you, or it's been replaced by a sea louse, which some fish have, and it's disgusting. You don't want that. So, this music, it's a lonely, delicate piano rises out of the shadows to paint an intricate and pretty picture with sound. Backed by gentle, synthesized strings, it swirls and rises like a tiny new vine, weaving its way up toward the light. So, take it away with Speaking in Tongues, Gunwallace. And that was Gunwallace's music, Speaking in Tongues. Lovely, lovely tune. And Speaking in Tongues is a classic phrase. I think it comes from the Bible. And it literally means to be able to speak in different languages. But people have taken the words literally and thought it actually means to speak with your tongue and gibberish sounds, and that they imagine angels actually speak this way, like going ah. It's rather silly, but people don't understand symbols and metaphor. Yeah, literally, that's what they think. They think.
I thought it was like a possession thing or a magical thing, but you're speaking other languages or maybe ancient languages.
Exactly.
Gibberish. I never understood gibberish.
Yeah, that's why. There are church services in evangelical churches, I think, and they believe they're being possessed by the Holy Spirit and speaking the language of the angels by going ah, like literally speaking with their tongue, because whoever, like someone had read that passage and taken it like the words literally rather than the meaning of the words. It's a common meaning that people like that didn't come out of common usage. That was still in. Like, to speak in different languages was still in common usage. It's bizarre. Yeah.
A fun thing, considering, the Gospels were, except one, written originally in Greek. So speaking in tongues is a Greek, a translation from Greek.
Okay.
And the translation from Greek means that it would go ομιλούσαν διάφορες γλώσσες. That's the actual, like tongues is γλώσσες. And the fun thing is that if you want to go learn a foreign language in Greece, the way you ask for it is, θέλω να μάθω μια γλώσσα. I want to learn a tongue.
Lovely. Well, there you
Yeah.
are. There's a proper usage of the term. And we say speaking in a foreign tongue. It's
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
shouldn't be hard to understand. But
Speaking in tongues literally means that they just could speak, and it comes from, I think, if I'm not mistaken, from Pentecost, from the description of the first Pentecost, where the Holy Spirit came in the version of flaming tongues, and but not a literal flaming tongue. It was just like tongues of fire, okay, that descended down over the heads of the apostles. And when that happened, they could suddenly speak all the languages of the world. So all the people that had gathered, from all regions, because it was, I think it was Easter. It was Easter, and many people that were worshiping the Jewish God had come, but not everyone was speaking Jewish. There were Greeks, there were, all kinds of different Romans, all types of different people, and these fishermen suddenly could speak in all these languages. And so they did the sermon in many languages, and people could understand them. And that was the miracle. That was the speaking in tongues.
There you are. That's where the myth comes from. And that does tie very nicely into this idea of being able to understand things from different cultures or not being able to understand things from different cultures. And this was an example of something that,
Yes.
I mean, literally, people were able to understand things from different culture in the myth because that's how it goes. But in our present modern day, people haven't been able to understand it. And they've created their own understanding, which is, an interesting little mirror to that. Isn't it? It's an ironic mirror too, because it shows like the opposite.
Absolutely.
Well, so let's see. You do Without Moonlight, which is, of course, a Greek comic about the Second World War and the progress of that in Athens and various things that happened from the sort of the beginning. Well, not from the beginning of the invasion. We're more like we just sort of jumped into like the middle of it, aren't we? Pretty much. But yeah, so this is for mainly an English-speaking audience because you're only slowly translating it into Greek afterwards. Yeah. So you had to translate a lot of concepts because this was specifically about things that happen in Greece. So you had to translate concepts like idioms and certain things that are specific to Greece to English, so English audiences would be able to understand what was happening. And not just idioms, but also say, okay, this is a room with all these barrels in, or, this is like this meeting outdoors, this kind of thing that like, or dances and stuff. So these things are specific to the time as well as the culture that English-speaking people might not be familiar with. So how did you go about doing that?
It was difficult. Okay, the main thing was that I had to always be aware of my own self in the sense that would the foreign person understand what this is? Or would the foreign person get the context of this? Because I know that Greek people will immediately pick up certain things from the imagery, but that does not hold for anyone else. So the plot had and the pacing had to be worked around this so that even a person that is not part of the Greek culture or the Greek common unconscious, let's say, would be able to follow. And sometimes this wasn't fully possible, which is why I have all the small essays and all the author notes accompanying and explaining certain things that I wouldn't be able to explain in the story without ruining the pacing completely and having to pause the story to explain certain things. So I sort of balance out these two things. For example, there are certain things that I wait for a very long time before I even introduce them, so that people understand the characters and what is their personality and what is the culture that they're following. So that when I introduce a cultural element, it becomes obvious that this is not because of a quirk or, a personal preference, but this is the common script of this culture that these people are following. That sort of thing.
Yeah, you do have the footnotes and things like that, and it's quite and the author notes too. It's quite valuable to have those because there's things that are very specific, to the Second World War. That
there are also things that apparently, and that was a culture shock for me as well, that happened only in Greece. Or very much around the area of Greece only, rather than anywhere where there were at least Nazi occupation or interaction with the Nazis, and or any kind of occupation, because we had three types of occupations, not just the German one. I'm just focusing on the German one because most of it takes place in Athens, where they were the dominant ones. So, for example, there was this thing that for Greeks is super ingrained in the common unconscious, which is the black mask. And the black mask was this traitor that would be called in blocks when, the Nazis would round up whole neighborhoods, and they would be wearing like a KKK hood, only it was black and not pointy. That was the only difference. So it was a literal sack with holes, and it was black or gray. And they would, they wore this so that they would not be recognized by other Greeks because they were traitors, and they would point who was, anti-Nazi or in the resistance or a supporter of the resistance or an informant, you name it. They would point in the block, and they would either arrest or shoot on the spot, whoever the mask pointed at. So this apparently is a very specifically Greek thing. First of all, when I first introduced it, I was called out that this was fantastical and never happened. So I had to find actual accounts and actual photos of this thing to show that, no, this is it. This is what happened here. This is how it went down. But in general, people that did believe it were shocked that it happened at all, because that was not something that was generally reported. So this is one thing. And the other thing is part of the culture. For example, we have a very extensive dance culture where the dances are not just happy dances, we also have mourning dances. And we have dances that are for when you are depressed or when you are ready to go to war and stuff like that. And I haven't really shown any of that because it would be super awkward to anyone that is not Greek. I am waiting for the right context to introduce it. And
it's hard to do that. It's hard to translate that to a visual medium, like a 2D visual medium too.
Yeah, that's also very hard.
Yeah.
Especially because a lot of those dances are just improvisational interpretative dances that are very, very specific. Like, they are iconic if you see them being danced. But good luck trying to depict it in a frame. That's
Yeah,
going to be fun.
works in a movie or a cartoon, but it's hard to do that and to draw it. Unless you have another character describing it. Oh yes, this is this and this is this. Oh, and you're doing this today. Oh, you're doing it very well. You know, she moves well.
I'm hoping that when it happens, it also is going to happen in Great Resistance eventually when we pick it up again. But it is also going to happen in Without Moonlight because you cannot avoid it. If you are in Greece, a part of the common language is dancing. No matter how modern you are, it has no, or traditional, it has no bearing. We dance over here. So the point is to be able to introduce it in a way that I don't need to have any character explain anything to anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And still the audience will be able to completely follow.
That's a challenge.
And I'm looking forward to it because I have the scene in my mind of when it will happen and how it will happen. And hopefully it will be smooth sailing. And I will also have an author's note underneath. And hopefully that will be good enough. So, yeah.
Give us some Zorba action.
No.
That's a really good point about caring about the characters and caring about the deeper sort of story about what's going on. And then kind of on top of that is the individual culture of where it's taking place and all those great specific things that give it its own texture and its own identity and all that stuff.
Yeah.
People are going to be on board for it.
Yeah.
It helps you become immersed in the story more.
Yeah.
When it's not just, people being basically pretending to be Greek, but really being American. That's how some writers would do it.
Yeah, that's awkward. At least for someone who is Greek and watches it, it's like watching it's like when you are like those the birds that imitate other birds, but not in voice, because the voice can. But they try to put in feathers in their own feathers.
Oh, really?
They look really weird. There is a kind of bird. I just don't remember what it is. And they try to do that as a sort of camouflage or as decoration. They gather feathers from other birds and they put them in their own feathers.
That's really cool.
And yeah, it is. But they also look really weird. Not ugly, just weird.
Yeah, they don't take on the real aspect of the thing they're pretending to be. Well, we'll broaden this out to the idea of things we don't get from other cultures. So you in Without Moonlight and Brave Resistance, you make it so that we do get the different cultural stuff. So that's your job as an author, and you do it very well. But often when you see movies and TV shows from other cultures, there are things you just don't get. So and comics as well, of course. So for you guys, what are some of the things that you see and you just have a hard time, or it took you the longest time in order to be able to understand?
Underage driving.
And yes, like in American TV shows and comics and whatever movies, like you always see these people driving to school, and you think, and like there's these ones in like convertible cars and Corvettes and Mercedes. You think, what the hell? Who drives to their school and who has a fancy BMW? And they're kids. Like,
not just okay, they are rich kids, but even if they were driving like a Volkswagen or I don't know, décevant.
Yeah.
I would still be weirded out because in Greece, nobody drives until they become 18 years old. Nobody. It's against the law.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you are the kid of a very large agrarian family living in a farm, then you do drive. But only when there is nobody else around.
Yeah, you're not driving to school.
No, cool.
Same in Australia, I think. I mean, people do get like P plates, and a P plate is a probationary plate, or an L plate, which is a learner plate, and they put that in their car. See, I have to translate this for you guys because you don't have that. And it's a common term. A P plater in Australia is someone who's driving around and they haven't got a full license, so they're called a P plater. And they have a square, like plastic, piece of plastic with a giant P on it, or a giant L on it to indicate that status, and they could be pulled over by the police and they could be searched for, to make sure they're not, like, they can't have any alcohol in the system or any drugs, and so it's a lot stricter for them to be driving around, and they can't drive within in certain hours and things, so there's much higher rules for those people. So, and I'm not sure how young they can be, maybe 16 or something, but they can't usefully drive. They can't be driving to school and all this kind of stuff because they're just like learners can only drive when they're actually learning. So there has to be like a full licensed person in the car actually giving them a lesson. And P-platers can drive, within certain hours and under certain conditions. Yeah. So there we are. That's a translating a foreign concept.
Yeah.
Because when you get your license here in Greece, your driver's license, you are obliged by law for the first year. You have a full license, right? And you are fully, like, you have all the freedoms that you would have as a driver for your car. But for the first year of your driving life, you are obliged to have a huge L or a huge N, which means new, letter on the back of your car, so that everyone knows that you are a new driver, which means basically that you are the new that will cause an accident.
Yes.
So
They can be wary of you.
Yeah, and basically you should give them a wide berth, first of all, and leeway when they are about to change lanes and stuff, like just let them go, because they are a menace. Actually, they are not really. I mean, it depends on the person. But the idea is that you are obliged to have that bloody thing for a year, a full year. And then you can take it off.
Oh, there you go. That's good. Yeah, but the underage driving, well, as we would say, in American TV shows is just so always so bizarre, and it took me so long to be able to understand that.
Very alien. Another alien thing in schools that I see in American movies is the whole getting super dressed up for school, like full makeup, fixed hair, and I don't know how true it is, or being very much like a model for kids, and having those classrooms that are very much like a playroom, all these things. Super alien in Greece.
Oh yeah.
Super alien.
Well,
You're not supposed to go dressed up in school. You're a show.
One of the strange things about American culture is, American cultural exports in their TV and movies is there's a huge focus on the high school years. And I'm not completely sure why that is, but there might be a couple of reasons that Americans do put a lot of, store by that. There's a lot of people who are said to be peaking in high school. So they have their their best years in, and then everything after that is a decline, and they're thinking back on it. So there's a huge amount of, at least the impression I get is there is nostalgia for those years when people were in high school, where they were popular or fun. But there's also, obviously, there's like a marketing to your prime audience, which are considered to be, I don't know, maybe like 14 to I don't know, 25-year-olds or something like that. So there's a lot of high school memory in these people, recent memory. But I'm pretty sure there's a lot of nostalgia for high school in American culture. So it is in so much of the media, and like you say, it's like so much of it is alien. It's dramatized, and it's same. It's considered a prison in Australia as well, but it's so dramatized, and the tensions and the stakes in high school, like comedies and horrors, and they've got every genre is set in high schools, and it's ridiculous, really. It's just,
well, I mean, it's like it's a highly emotional time. It's the coming of age technically. Hormones raging. You have authority figures, but you're kind of an adult. Like there are lots of reasons to focus your drama on people that age, and then maybe to exaggerate their adultness and stuff.
Yes. Having 30-year-olds play them. So.
Or giving them more freedoms than most actual teenagers have.
So the Canadian high school experience can't be that different from...
I don't know. We didn't have high school when I was a kid. But, they have it now.
You were taught in the snowfields of...
Yeah, exactly. Just sort of like, there's the snow.
Here's your axe. Go.
Exactly.
You man.
Probably fairly similar to Australia. The driving thing, I was going to say, similar to Australia.
Okay.
I think it's more rigid now than when I was when I got my license. But wait, what was the question about high school?
Well, it's not similar to the American experience, with all the proms and the homecoming and being dressed up and.
It's not. I don't remember it being as big a deal. That's one thing I noticed about these high school movies was like the football culture and the cheerleaders and the prom and all that stuff. That was all like kind of alien somewhat. Although we would have dances and of course chance to get close and raging hormones, and we'd have all that stuff. But they were just a little bit different and they didn't seem as big a deal. Ditto Thanksgiving for more adult stories, like Thanksgiving being such a huge thing. I would see that in so many movies.
Yeah.
It's great, but it's not as big a deal as in these American movies.
Okay. Yeah. The prom. I mean, obviously, I think everybody has like some sort of dance that kids would have, and that's not an uncommon thing. But it wasn't like in the prom kind of thing. Like in American media, it's like the be all and end all. It is the main thing. Maybe that's just an artifact of because it's made for like entertainment. I don't know, but in those things, like there's so much stake set by that, and there is like prom king and prom queen and things, and like there's the level.
You got a big bucket of pig's blood, and you got
exactly. You get all those pigs. But the level of drama around that, like, is like that's got to be more than just something created for entertainment. That has to be based on some reality, unless it's
maybe some. But you're right. It might, like a lot of American students might say that that's not like that's a dramatic artifice.
It's just a trope that has become ingrained in media, maybe.
Yeah, it's a movie trope, not an American high school real life trope.
Although it is becoming, because of the prevalence in media, it's becoming more international. Like, everybody's getting that, I think. Yeah, like life imitates art. It does.
I would say in anime, the festivals, like the idea of festivals Oh, am I feeding back there? Sorry, guys.
It's a bit strange. What did you say?
All these like outdoor festivals
Oh,
in
okay.
anime and stuff.
Oh, in anime, yeah, anime has
That's different.
a
Oh.
yeah, it has, like you say, like, because the American stuff has like specific like tropes and events. Yeah, so the anime has this one's like that I think it's probably real. It's based on like when they have a summer, a summer, when summer comes around, they have a summer festival, and they have the cherry blossom festival, sort of. And these are like major moments in their culture, it seems. And the specific things happen during the summer festival, in that, you know, people dress in their kimonos and whatever else they're called. I can't remember the names of them. Obis and stuff. So they get dressed up in that, and they look really pretty and traditional. And then there's fireworks that they have to see at the end of the night. And there's these you catch the little fish to give to someone, and you have these horrible like treats of jellied sugared squids and stuff. They have all that. Oh, so there, this is all. I don't know how real it is, but it's in every single bloody anime that's ever existed.
Another thing that the alienated does, I remember a lot when seeing teenage movies, usually like American teenage movies, is that the parents are absent.
Yes.
And this is, like, this blows the mind of a Greek person. Like the general expression when stuff happens that shouldn't be happening to kids is, don't you have parents? In the sense that, and I know that it's not, it sounds very familiar, you know, rhetorical question, but it reflects the fact that a routine, especially for minors, I'm not talking about adults or even young adults, like around 17, 18 years old, but I'm talking about 11, 12, 13 years old, 14 years. Your routine as a kid is so intertwined with your parents that there is no way, like no way that you can be gone for more than 2 or 3 hours and not get a call from someone. and that is super expected, you know, in Greek culture. Like your parents will be touching down with you. Even the most liberal parents will be touching down with you. And they need to know more or less where you are. And a kid is not really supposed, even though it happens a lot in modern Greece, still a kid is not supposed to be out beyond midnight if they are younger than, let's say, 15, 16 years old. They should be back home. And it's so bizarre. Like they show these movies, these kids to roam around, take executive decisions, go into vehicles, get into trains, go exploring in woods and stuff. And there is no parent, no adults to be seen for miles.
It's true. And I mean, to some degree, that is obviously like a thing made for the media, because, you know, it's going to make your story better if the kids have this independence. But it's also based on a certain reality, because there's lots of people who have, like, you know, they've recounted their time as, you know, from when they were children, and they did have a lot of a lack of parental supervision for a lot of it. So I don't know how true that is, like in the current modern day we're living in, where people are more protective. But certainly people were allowed to, you know, to go off on their own for a long time back in the old days in the USA. I think even in Australia.
I'm saying that because kids also roamed a lot, but they would need to touch down. Like before the age of cell phones, they would need to be within hearing distance. And with a Greek, that's a lot of distance because we saw yeah, like a summer sound when I was a kid, and that was the last remnants of kids playing outside. Before the huge technological advance of video games and stuff that changed this. But when I was a kid, one of the biggest summer sounds were mothers hollering for their kids, like, "Where are you?" And they had to, sprint back to their mothers, show themselves, and then sprint back to where they were.
Oh dear. Yeah, well, that wouldn't translate. Like if you saw that, if I saw that in a show, I wouldn't understand that at all. That'd be quite alien to me. That is actually, I was thinking, like when you see like movies about the past, you have the same kind of translation problem as well, because it is an alien country as well, and certain things like, what the hell, how is that even a thing? Like you see like a footage of Australia from the 1920s or something, and there's people riding horses down the main streets in Melbourne and Sydney, and you think, how, when was that even a thing? Like in the 20s. It's bizarre. Like that is not a world I know, and there's so that can happen as well, which is rather interesting.
Totally.
Well, just going back to the high school thing, unless I'm like treading over you guys, you wanted to say something?
Oh no, I was just going to say that in the 20s we had flocks of sheep in colonized Plaka, like literal sheep that would go past and graze, and we have footage of that.
That's amazing. Well, something that occurred to me about the whole American high school thing is, I mean, this might not be just for America, but like I see this in American high schools, it's always very indoors. Like there's corridors and everything, like they look in classrooms from corridors, and it's like it's a whole big building where everything happens indoors. And that was so totally alien to me as an Australian. Like, I thought, how does that, because in Australia it's very, warm all year round in most places. Even when it's cold, it's not that cold, doesn't snow or anything. So schools are rarely indoors. I think some private schools and things are like that, but most schools are completely outdoors. Like, obviously there's like the schools are within like rooms and stuff like that, but there's no indoor corridors. All the you just like walk along verandas and enter schools from the outside. It's not all a huge indoor complex with corridors with locker rooms on either side, and that is a bizarre thing. But that's something I saw from American schools on TV, and also the Japanese ones you see in anime and things like that. And it's
So you grew up in like an Ewok village?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the trees and jub and all that stuff.
Wooden bridges and stuff.
Yeah, you just had to watch out for the stormtroopers, and you're fine.
Always.
Frickin' speeders. But out, like, it's hard to explain, but like a rows of buildings with a veranda, and you just walk along the verandas. You go in the schools, and I don't know, it's hard to explain, but not indoor complexes where everything happens inside. Like indoor gyms and all this kind of stuff. It's very much you go out on the sports field to do your sports. Oh, right. Sports, don't get me started. American team sports, that is a weird thing.
Oh my God, that too as well.
Yeah, what?
Or
the hell?
Competing schools, like teams.
Yeah.
That was like super weird. Super weird.
I know. And they have...
Oh, please go.
As Pete was explaining, you know, this thing, homecoming, which is again something I never understood until she told us about it, was homecoming is a big kind of cultural thing for them in their schools, because they have their teams going around playing other schools, like gridiron, or, you know, the American football, I think, maybe basketball as well. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of lacrosse and whatever else they do. But yeah, so they go around and they play sports against these other schools, and then homecoming is this big thing where they have a big kind of celebration for their team, and the whole school gets in on it, and they like have banners and like performances, and the cheerleaders do dances, and they have a dance where they celebrate these athletes, they call them, coming back. And that's like, I never understood anything about that. Like, this was totally new to me. And Pitt says that's even bigger than prom. So that's wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Finally I get that. But I still don't get it like an American would. It's still alien to me. But yeah, the sports are that important to them. Sports never that important in any Australian school that I've been in. Like, no, it's school. Who cares?
And unless there is a specific situation where you have a feud between different schools, but that's very rare, and it is only really not a whole school. It's just a specific class versus a specific class from different schools. Like, and nobody else cares.
Oh yeah, we'd have feuds, and we'd like beat up other kids from other schools.
Yeah.
We had a feud. We wouldn't play a sport against them.
It's not a formal thing. It's not an official thing that happens, and there is this feeling that if you are a student, you are basically part of the whole student community of all of Greece that is in the same class.
Oh.
There is this idea that we are all, you know, rowing in the same gallows. So there's that. And as far as sports and stuff, and amenities in general, the amenities in American schools, as they are shown, are crazy. They are insane. What we get as kids, even today, probably worse today because budget is even worse. But what we get is just a room with desks, and the desks are very militaristically placed, you know, one behind the other in rows. And you get the teacher's desk and the chalkboard, and that's it. That's the classroom.
Yeah, it's pretty standard.
Yeah, there is no carpet, there is no extra bling, there are no extra, you know, facilitating tools for learning. There is nothing else. And as far as sports is concerned, you do get the amazing sports installation of a single basketball ring where everyone congregates. And if you are lucky, you get two. So you can have a whole proper basketball game if you get enough people. So that's our thing. So yeah, it's super bizarre to see, you know, whole gymnasiums of like closed gymnasiums, and that's part of the school and not, you know, the municipality thing or something.
Always like doing dodgeball and all this in the that's the thing. I mean, a couple of schools I went to, we did have gym, and that was like it was a new thing when I was going to school. Like, it was a new fancy thing, and we thought, oh, this is very American, and you know, mainly focused around basketball, but like it wasn't something like that would be like in the American like media where they show them like climbing up ropes and all this kind of stuff, and you know, doing all this kind of special thing they had to do. Like, Baines, what about you in Canada with your sport culture?
Yeah, similar. I mean, we had some. There was like people who were, and I had friends who were really into it, into hockey or into track and field or baseball, and football. But no, it never, and it was kind of a big deal. I went to track meets, and I think only track meets was where they were sort of bigger events, and there were, the whole school would get involved once a year or something for the, with schools competing against other schools.
Yeah.
But yeah, aside from that, it was never as big a deal as it seemed to be in American movies, maybe American culture. Like it was there, but it was never even close to that, significant.
Yeah, the hyper
Most
level
of us,
there.
if you were saying, sure, it was significant, but yeah.
I mean,
I have something that you will find super alien for schools. Every morning, the school classes begin at 8:30, but you are supposed in the morning, but you are supposed to be there at least 8:15, because we get communal prayer in the morning.
Oh, okay.
And you actually have to congregate in the yard. Okay, can you hear this?
Yeah. Cars beeping their horns at each other.
Okay, that's a bride.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's a wedding.
Yeah.
That's a bridal convoy.
We have the same thing here. There you go. Cultural similarity.
Oh, interesting.
See, more culture is happening as we speak. So we get your standard Orthodox Christian prayer that everyone knows, which is the Lord's Prayer, and every kid says it. You have one kid that is picked randomly by the teacher, usually the principal, who is out, and leads the prayer, basically says the Lord's Prayer. And then you can go in class. Okay. And this is Greek school.
Right.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a thing in, I think in American public schools, you wouldn't be allowed to do that, though. Some do get it because of the separation of church and state. In Australia, they sort of did it. It's not that so much. Not prayers before, although we did have kind of religious time for religious services. It depends on in Australia because there are like religious schools, Catholic schools, and all this kind of thing. So,
same here. Like there are some Catholic schools, and they'd be very similar to public schools, but they'd have the morning prayer, the various, religious.
Right. These are the secular schools. They're all very secular schools.
Okay.
Because we don't have the separation of state and church. You can opt out. It's not obligatory, but it is something that is part of the culture. Those that don't do the prayer just go in class ahead of everybody else. And if they know that the test is coming, these guys are the ones that write down all the illicit notes. While everything else is happening outside.
Clever clogs. Very, very smart. Well, yeah, sports, from what I remember in Australian schools, was more. I mean, you do that Olympic style stuff, the running and the hurdles, and sometimes it'd be more advanced stuff. There's javelin. No, sometimes it'd be javelin, but there's high jumps and long jumps and shot puts and things. But yeah, it's usually that Olympic style kind of, and sometimes that's inter-school, so you'd be playing against other schools, I think, but it's not to the level of like you even know who the other school is. You don't even care really.
Yeah,
and it's usually just within the school where you do that competition against, and I was never really a big part of that. But nothing like in in the US stuff. What about the team sports in Greece, Tance? It's the like you said it was like the basketball, but they must have like more to this.
Well, not within the school context. The school is not supposed, at least not expected, to officially train you or create teams or anything like that. Everything is super, super casual and super experimental, let's say.
Okay.
Depending on who is your PE teacher, you might be doing nothing, literally just walking around and getting bored for a period, or you could be actually doing some actually good physical, exercise. However, there are leagues. There are sport leagues that are basically the teams, the official teams that you get in football and basketball, like the red team, the green team, Olympiacos, Panathinaikos, super important big football teams. Anyone that follows European football will know at least one of those. But those are not just professional football teams. This is just a branch. This is an entire league, and this league covers the whole range of sports, from track sports to shooting.
Okay.
And you, if you want to go pro and go really seriously into a sport, you enroll into one of those leagues, and they have actual coaches and actual people that will train you.
Interesting.
Yeah, but not in the school.
Ah, that's interesting. Well, yeah, I don't know how that works in Australia. I have no idea. I think sometimes schools have specialist programs. Some special schools have special relationships with things and stuff set up, but it's not an institutional thing in Australia that there is it's not universal from what I remember. I mean, schools had different amenities. Like I was in schools where they had tennis courts and and all that kind of stuff, and access to great swimming pools. So you'd have the like the most important sporting event of the year would be the swimming carnival, where everybody would be competing in water sports like 100-meter like swimming and butterfly and water polo and diving and all that kind of stuff. So, and other schools where you could do archery and things. So it varies a lot. Like, one of my schools even had surfing as the
Wow.
thing, because the beach wasn't very far away.
Amazing.
So, yeah,
Right.
but it's not. It just depends on like the school itself, rather than like a regulated thing. But yeah, it's very unlike anything you see in American stuff that I will probably never be able to understand. But I mean, we talked about American stuff. Is there any other stuff we've seen from, or read about from overseas that we've had trouble understanding?
The culture in Korean schools is really like it does overlap to a point with the Greek overachieving culture, because here you get two kinds of students. The ones that have decided that they don't care, and everyone else who is super anxious and overachieving, and you get a lot of competition between students, and all of the toxic stuff that comes from that you get, which is something that is portrayed in the Korean school culture as well. However, one of the alien things that happened there, and to me, as a Greek, are super alien, is that you get the homeroom teacher actually taking over the life of the kid. instead of the parents. Like they become the ruler of their life,
Wow.
especially toward the senior classes. At least from what I have seen in series and movies and stuff like that. They also wear a uniform that is very formal looking, and they wear it until they are like 19 years old, something like that. They go well over into college almost. There's that. And they have this thing, they have study rooms where, depending on the type of school, is either a dedicated study room for the entire class, or they segregate kids according to their competence in different study rooms. And they have to study in school. And that is, again, very alien for a Greek school.
Yeah.
You study at home and you do whatever you can at home. So,
Yeah, it's not about that communal kind of stuff. It's
No.
more solitary. It's strange. Yeah, the Asian school cultures, and I say that not to be racist. It's the fact that a lot of schools across the Asian world, you know, China and Korea and Japan, the biggest places, but it's also like in Thailand, you know, it's quite similar because there's a Chinese influence across a lot of places. It's very focused on school and children studying and intensively and having a very
incredibly demanding and intense. Yeah. So that's part of the undercurrent in a lot of those stories.
And they have a very a communal kind of a way of doing it too. It's like, you know, we all have to do this to pull together, and we all have to conform, and that's not a like, you know, a Western kind of way of looking at it and like it being pejorative. It is like actually how they think. Like I've had friends who've taught in these schools, and I mean, Baines, you did some teaching in Japan, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there we are. So yeah, you've had that experience as
well. Not in the school system. This was
for adults or something, but still, it's,
it was mostly adults. I did some. There were some teens and a little bit of kid teaching but outside the system. It was additional.
Okay.
Learning kind of thing.
I had a friend who was teaching in Thailand and I think Cambodia and Laos, and it was very much that kind of thing there. It was very strict, communal, kind of militaristic kind of organization of teaching and behavior. All this, like Chance, you were talking about like the religious prayers people would say. In Thailand, it was more about like oaths to the state and school, because it's a very militaristic culture. So it was very strict, and it's quite an alien thing again. It's hard to understand.
An oath to the state here would have everyone in mutiny. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you are a patriot or not.
Yeah.
Everyone would be flipping off everybody else.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
You.
It would be, I'm not doing it.
I love it.
There's no way. Like, you would get, the only people who would totally love this would be the super far right. I'm not talking about right-wing Greeks, because right-wing Greeks would also flip off the whole thing and say, no. Super far right, like the ones that basically ascribe to Nazism or fascism. You know, they are nuts. Only those people. Why? Because the culture in this is, we do not trust the state. The state is the enemy. There is no way we swear allegiance to the state. Which is completely different to the country. It's like super separated. as a concept in Greece. There are different words for it anyway.
Yeah.
So you get like the state is your enemy, is the one that is always out to get you. And unfortunately, basically it's true. The country is my identity, is the whole, the representation of everything that is a Greek person and Greece, the history, the whole 9 yards. So nobody.
Yeah, you don't
would
connect
swear.
those two things. Actually, speaking of that, like swearing allegiance, that's a thing like you see in American stuff, like they swear allegiance to the flag, and you're not meant to do that, but it has, well, I mean, you're not meant to do that in schools, I think, but it did come apparently in the 1950s, they started that as a reaction to, the Red Scare and communism. So they wanted to be ultra, nationalist. Because, the world was very kind of split back then with the Cold War, so it's understandable, but it's like it's hung on till today for some reason, and people still do it. And I suppose out of tradition, and they're used to it, so it's hard to give up tradition. Hey?
If something is protocol and routine, it's very hard to change.
Yeah, exactly.
In the school system. We did have allegiance to the flag pre-World War II, when we had, guess what, another dictatorship. And he was a fascist, and he was trying to be like Mussolini, and we did the Nazi salute, and we did the allegiance to the flag, and everyone who didn't do it got literally exiled to one of the thousands of tiny islands that Greece has, and got blacklisted and stuff like that, because the Red Scare happened in Greece before and after the World War.
Yeah.
But especially before, not especially, it was just as bad after. But yeah, I mean, with the dictatorship though was dead, the one that did that. After that, because it got so much associated with a very hostile and basically almost bloodthirsty state, it was dropped and it never happened again, like swearing allegiance and stuff like that after World War II.
Yeah. Well, I mean, related to that, like, the swearing allegiance stuff, in American stuff is the military culture, which is something I don't know if Native Americans see so much, but as like outsiders, we would see this, and it does become quite striking because the culture is unusually focused on the military to an extremely high degree, in that, you have TV shows and movies about like everyone knows someone who is serving in the, the Air Force and the Army or something like that. And like there's so much stuff around like the military industrial complex, like we're making ships for the Navy, or we're servicing airplanes or whatever. So there's and it's a militaristic culture in terms of ancient Rome, because that's where they've modeled themselves on that. So you have of course the American eagle everywhere, which is directly from ancient Rome, with holding lightning bolts and all this kind of stuff. And it's we have people being thanked for their service all the time, which is just, you'd never do that in Australia. Like, even soldiers would look at you as being bizarre if you do that. You'll be looked at as a weird kind of bootlicker if you did that. That would think of you as mentally deficient. But I'm not saying Americans are mentally deficient or bootlickers from doing this. I'm saying that's how it would be looked at if we did that in Australia. But in America, yeah, that's part of the culture. So I'm not criticizing that. It's just a different culture. And it's hard to understand for an outsider. But sorry, Tance, you were going to say that?
No, I was going to say that Greece is also very not militaristic. We have a very weird love-hate relationship with war and the army for many reasons that I cannot go into right now. But we are a war culture, and we have always been since ancient times. But at the same time, we are definitely not war culture in the Roman sense. We are a war culture in the sense of I have to be battle ready for all occasions. So being ready for battle, and not just actual military battle, just being ready to face whoever comes at you is very much ingrained in the Greek culture. So when it comes to army stuff, we have conscription, people are conscripted here. Men are obligated to serve in the army for a year, more or less, like 9 to 12 months, depending on where you go. And the culture isn't a thank you for your service, because it's mandatory.
Yeah.
Everyone does it, and it's not something that you can say opt out of.
Yeah.
But there is a certain respect if you are wearing the uniform. People offer you respect, not subservient respect, but they just don't give you flack for stuff. Like if you look tired, they might let you sit down in the train, stuff like that. I mean, there's an extra courtesy that you are going through this for the country. We all know that it sucks. Nobody likes it. But you are going through this, and we appreciate it, but silently. Not in a sense of, oh, thank you for going. And on the other side, there are ways to opt out of your military service. However, it is extremely shameful. If anyone skips their service, they are considered less than worthy as people over here. Either because unless it's for some kind of physical or health reason, not that. But if you opt out by paying, if you opt out by some kind of loophole that is for top tier kids in the top social classes, all of that is considered that you have bailed on the community, basically.
Yeah.
So we cannot value you as much as we would value someone else that didn't. And it has nothing to do with being aggressive or anything like that. It's just being a token of, if something happens, I will be ready for battle. That's the culture over here.
A lot of cultures have that. Particularly Israel. That's one where it's very hard to understand because it's universal conscription. So there's it doesn't matter if you're male or female. It's it seems to be very equal, which seems to be one of the more equal armies in the world, at least earlier on than anyone else. So that's a very strange thing to see, and it's a very strange thing to get used to, because that is very much depicted in media from Israel, that the everyone serves in the military, and they're all they're like hardened conscripts. It's very hard to sort of even like relate to people who you meet from Israel, because most of them, like 90% of them, it seems, are all like veterans, and often they've seen action. So it's quite an unusual people. What's that?
No, very much so. I would agree.
Yeah. Baines, are you going to say that?
I said that's interesting. Yeah. I don't think I've ever met anyone from Israel.
Oh, really? Oh, well, you do meet them around, and I suppose that it like there are places where people migrate to. Oh, that's God. I keep bringing up these things. I mean, we should be wrapping up, but there was another thing I remember, like early on from looking at American cinema, American TV shows, was like the racial like mix in these things, and America has a very specific how would you say, like heritage or racial situation because, of course, of slavery and all that kind of stuff that no other country really shares to that degree. I mean, some countries have had some kind of legacy of it, but I don't know anywhere else that has had that extreme legacy of it. And so that lends it a very weird kind of dynamic and look and like racial relationship that no one else really has to that same degree. And that was a really weird thing to understand. It took a long time for me, you know, as a child watching this stuff to be able to understand what was happening there and why people were interacting as the way they did because of that history of slavery that, you know, we don't have in Australia and a lot of other countries just do not have. So I imagine it'd be the same kind of thing. Like you watch like race relations in Britain, and again it's quite an alien thing because they have their history of colonization, like which is very different from everyone else. Like they've had like I think it's during the 1950s and the 1960s, a lot of like Afro-Caribbean people moving back from the West Indies to go to Britain. So they had a huge population of black people who specifically came over in the 50s and the 60s. And a lot of people from India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. And that changed the cultural mix. But, you know, due to specific reasons of empire and, you know, colonization, of course. And that creates like tensions and, you know, people thinking about things in different ways and, you know, interacting and hating each other and loving each other for different reasons, which you just don't understand as a child watching this because you don't have that personal experience with that. It's impossible to have had that personal experience with it. And even most adults don't really get what's happening there. And even say British adults or, you know, British people who have been brought up with that don't understand it from an outsider's perspective, and say Americans don't understand their racial mix from an outsider's perspective, so they can't really translate it. So it takes a long time for an external person to be able to understand it because, you know, there's no one to explain to you why things are the way they are and why people hate other people. It's yeah, it's awkward. Did you guys find that when you're watching stuff from America and England and places like that? Like, did you immediately understand, you know, the racial situation and why they had these tensions and things?
I'm trying to think back. But no, I didn't.
Yeah.
I remember Greece now is completely different than when I was a kid. But still, it retains, like we are basically a monoculture in the sense that over 90%, and back when I was a kid, at least 97%, today might be 95, 90, like over 90, whatever, percent of people were Greeks. Like the same type of person, race, culture, even religion. I mean, we have had the Muslim Greeks of Thrace, and we have had the Muslim Pomaks and the Jewish Greek people, the Romaniots, and all of those people. And these are part of us. They have always been Greek, just like us. But in everything except religion, they also are and were exactly the same. There was no really any difference in all of that, which was also why people really found it, like even during the war, when they were trying to round up all the Jewish people, wherever it didn't happen lightning quick, so there were no real chances of stopping the pogrom. But in every other place that people understood that what was going to happen, everyone, with the church being the first to do it, protected the Jewish people and hid them in a very bureaucratic manner, in the sense that they destroyed the records. It's as simple as that. And there's even a story about how the top SS guy went to the priest, the episcopal. Anyway, the top ranking priest that we have here, and I don't remember the English translation of.
Patriarch.
Patriarch, thank you. And he said, "Where are your Jews? We want them." And the patriarch said, "We have two Jews. One is me, and the other one is the mayor over here. You can take us."
Oh.
And he didn't, of course, take any, because they were the officials of the particular city. And if that happened, there would be other problems. So that's how they gave up on rounding up the Jews in certain cities. And everyone was safe there. In other places, unfortunately, they didn't have the time to actually destroy records and protect. So anyway, we seeing race differences as stark as what there is in America and in the US, for us was super alien. Like having someone that is completely different racially and culturally. Like racially we could understand, but having all the other stuff the same, but super completely different, that was super bizarre.
Yeah, the cultural differences.
Yeah, I just remember taking it in stride, in that, oh, this is another country, and I was thinking about it in my mind as a kid, like another planet, and that's how they there. And that's how I followed everything.
Oh, it was like so bizarre, because I mean, in American media, it was always very there's a huge big thing about like portrayals of people. So they would only, for the longest time, stuff that came out of America would be like, you know, mainly white. So we'd have like in the westerns and all that kind of stuff. Oh, Baines is having to go. Bye, Baines.
Yeah.
So it's
See you later. Bye. Ciao, everybody.
Bye. It'd be mainly white. So that was a thing. So as an external person, you thought, America's all white. That's how it is. And then suddenly they would introduce, here is another race here. It's like in a game. Like, here's this other group. Oh, they have black people in America. Okay, but they're a smaller amount because there's only like a sidekick person. So okay, and they have Asian people in America. Oh my goodness, that's another group. And then this another, like in the 80s, I think it was. Suddenly there's I mean, it happened earlier than the 80s, but like mainly in the 80s, you'd say, Latin American is another huge thing, and they like late 80s, 90s, they were marketing like the Latin Americans, and it was, oh my god, I never even knew where did they come from. And of course, like to actual Americans, this is like, you know, these people have obviously been here even before the country was America. There were Latin Americans, but like to at least like Australian people watching it was like, this is a whole new thing, because the media had only just embraced that. So that is another bizarre kind of thing. So for them, it's about representation, but for us, it's about like, I didn't even know that existed. That is new.
Well, I don't remember having such a level of a culture shock, and I think that the reason for that is that there have been, like, even in the 50s and 60s, there were huge migratory waves from Greece to the US, and the practically at least like more than half of the population here has family in the US because someone in their family tree migrated there in the 50s and 60s. So we did get a lot of feedback as a social group, I mean, as a country, about what was going on and what the deal was in the US.
Oh,
So
right.
I don't remember having that level of shock because I remember the quote, United States is a melting pot. That was the cliche that I grew up with. And we're talking, I grew up in the 80s, the full 80s. I was there for the entire experience. So we had this idea, and I remember that it was, like the 80s was, as I recall it, a far more optimistic time and a far more like larger than life time to live. And the idea was that America was this place where a lot of people were living, a lot of cultures, a lot of different races, and they are ahead of everything, leading civilization into something that was, more equal, more, for human rights and stuff like that. And they were always like, we had the idea of the US World War II hero coming into the 80s in jeans and sneakers. So yeah, that image changed drastically going into the 90s and the 2000s, as Greece also started to get a lot of new migratory waves. First, we had, like when the Iron Curtain fell, we had a lot of Slavic people coming up to us, and that was a big shock to Greece because it was a lot of people in a very short period of time, and they completely upended the balance that existed before. Not with necessarily negative intentions or something, but it was like you have to live with new roommates that you have to get to know, and that is always a transition. And after that happened, we got slammed with the migratory waves from the east in general.
Oh, yeah.
So
Arab countries and things, and
yeah, and then of course we had the big thing that was Syria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, that all.
Because Greece is like a meeting point for the East and the West.
Exactly.
Like, so on the bottom of Europe down there, and it's sort of
We are the back gate. Everyone tries to go in through the back gate.
Exactly, and it was also the same for Eastern Europe as well. So it's all connected, and Africa as well. So it's across the water. It's a very convenient jumping off point. So it's totally different. Well, I suppose we should wrap this up because we're going over time.
Although it is fascinating, but we should.
It's incredibly fascinating. There's so many different points to it. It just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening to QUACKCAST number 548. Thank you very much, Tance.
Thank you too, and it was a pleasure.
And thank you to the absent Baines who just had. Oh, and happy birthday to Pit Face as well. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Face.
Yes. All right. Oh, and course, remembering September 11. This is being done on the 11th of September, so memory to that, which is a piece of universal experience culture, really, because we all saw this on TV as it happened. So,
Yeah.
okay, goodbye.
Bye-bye.